Hi everybody, this is JJ with Experience with My Dog. You might be wondering about what this huge box is about, and this is actually a dog food. This is a fresh human grade dog food from Ollie, and it's actually delivered straight to your door. So we're going to find out about all about Ollie and whether or not this might be right for your dog. So who and what is Ollie? Well, they're an actual company that started in 2016, and their real claim to fame is essentially to produce fresh human-grade dog food, which is shipped directly to you. Now, this is freshly produced and then frozen and then shipped out to you. They offer a couple of different proteins, actually a few different proteins, that are ultimately defined by a specialized profile that you create online for your dog that asks you different types of information like breed, weight, activity level, and other aspects. Once that's all completed, essentially you define the interval period that you wanted to get shipped out to you. This could be as little as 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, or their default period, which is 8 weeks. And so ultimately it helps to streamline the entire experience about feeding your dog food, where you don't have to go to the store and pick anything up, and you can feel confident that you're getting a good quality dog food. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about a couple of different aspects when it comes to the company. We're going to talk about their ingredients, essentially the different types of options that you have for the Ollie dog food itself. We're going to talk about their sourcing and production. So everything is produced here in the United States. They don't have anything that comes from China in terms of either their produce or the actual animal proteins themselves. All the animal proteins are sourced from farms here, either in the United States or in Australia. Now, in terms of the 4 proteins that are available, you have chicken, beef, lamb, and turkey. That's a good amount of variation because it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to rotate over time and switch things up for your dog, which is something that I advocate. Now, none of the produce and none of the actual animal proteins themselves are organic, or I would say, let's say on the highest class of quality, so things being like grass-fed or pasture-raised. They all do adhere to, let's say, federal standards in the US, so essentially still the quality that you would be able to feed yourself. Now, one important point that I will make, though, is that compared to many dog foods, I will give credit to Ollie in terms of the composition of their actual ingredients. And this is because they do utilize quite a bit of, I'd say, the total animal protein within their actual dog food itself. So, for example, if we take a look at turkey, for instance, and we take a look at that recipe mix, we're going to find that they actually use a pretty good amount of different parts of the turkey. So ground turkey is the first ingredient, then pumpkin, turkey thigh, turkey liver, turkey heart, carrot, and turkey gizzard. That's actually quite a number of different elements of the turkey that all provide different types of nutrients and value to your dog. And so this is something that it's actually not that common. In many dog foods, you'll see quite a bit more mixture, and many times, even if it's quote unquote the first ingredient, it'll have another animal protein that's actually the majority of the ingredients. So you could say turkey, and then you could get a lot of chicken meal in there, take for instance. So I do think that they do a pretty good job within this, including some of their supplemental items, let's say like coconut oil or blueberries, actually would statistically be in a higher percentage than you would see in many other foods. So I think that that's pretty solid in that regard. Beyond that, they don't have any confirmed ethical or humane practices that they state that they have adherence to, but that is ultimately a choice that you make as a consumer if that's important to you. We do like that because they can provide certain values and benefits to the actual quality of the animal proteins that you're providing, but it's not something in place here. Now, I'd say beyond that, something else that I did also note is that their actual cod liver oil that they do utilize here is at least sustainably caught, and it's actually from Norway. It's line caught as opposed to, let's say, farm, so that improves that quality as well. And so that's another important element in terms of the overall ingredient composition that you have within the different types of dog foods that you have available from Ollie. And I'd say last but not least, something to be mindful of is that they now have multiple kitchens, so you might see some variance in, say, in the consistency of how the Ollie might look from one to the other. Even though they all meet the same nutritional value, they all are actually maybe using the same class of ingredients, they might look a little bit different. And this is kind of similar to maybe your own experience of going to a chain restaurant, right? They all have the same type of food, but it's maybe prepared just a little bit differently. So it is something that I have seen reported by different people that have ordered the service, so something to keep in mind. So a couple of last notes that I do want to talk about here are going to be, one is that they have confirmed that all the food is actually prepared in a USDA certified facility, and they do actually do essentially testing and analysis once the actual food is batch produced. And this is important in terms of lot coding, so that if you call in, you want to be able to verify information, or if there is some type of issue with your dog, it can be quickly identified and it can be broken down to finding out where it is in the production process. In addition to this, they have also confirmed that the food is not irradiated, which can actually bring down the nutritional value of the food. You also, talking about the nutritional value of the food, it is confirmed that it is essentially a low cooking process. And the reason why that's important is that some other foods that are especially that use a lot of meals are cooked at much higher temperatures, and this can actually reduce much of the nutritional value, and you have to add it in through synthetic let's say additives or different types of minerals to be able to enrich the food, because it's essentially been broken down to such a state. So having a fresher class of ingredient means that you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the ordering experience. This is pretty straightforward. You do this, of course, through either a computer, it doesn't matter what type of computer you have, or through a mobile device. Even if you call them on the phone, they're going to tell you need to make a profile, and this all happens online. So you head over to the website. Once you head over to the website, you're going to put in your name, your email address. You're going to put in the information about your dog, including your dog's name, its birthday, its breed type, if you know its breed type, its current weight, its current what's called body type, and then its activity level. And then based off of all this information, Ollie and their kind of internal analysis, which is derived from, of course, their veterinarians and their nutritionists, define for you what's the recommended dog type of food that they have from their different types of protein mixes. Now, you still, to a degree, have the ability to kind of define some recommendations as far as, you know, if your dog has an allergy or sensitivity to something, you can put in fields to this. So let's say if your dog had a sensitivity to, let's say, for instance, lamb, you could put in lamb so that you don't get recommended lamb and you get recommended those other proteins. So that is something that they do have kind of built in. But it's very important to kind of really make sure that you're putting in all this information correctly or to the best of your knowledge, because ultimately what you're going to be provided in terms of the amount of food is defined by completing this profile. But overall, it's a pretty straightforward process. You can probably get it done, I'd say, in about 10 minutes or so, and then you will ultimately be left with a summary page, which will let you know essentially the amount of food that you're going to be getting for your dog, when it will be delivered, and kind of the interval. Now, it's important to note that right now, in terms of the ordering process, Ollie has shifted to only delivering the food every 8 weeks. Now, depending on the size of your dog, this actually could be quite an amount of food that you might have to pack into your freezer. So it is something to kind of be mindful of. Now, we have called them and asked them essentially if you could accommodate a different type of interval, and they have said that if their customer asks for it, they are willing to accommodate intervals as little as 2 weeks or 4 weeks. But that is something you can't do online. It is something you're gonna have to call in or email to them to have them adjust that interval period. Now, one other important thing that I think you want to keep in mind when you get the Ollie dog food is actually going to be what else is inside the box. They've done a pretty nice job of giving you a good amount of information, so telling you exactly, you know, of course, all the ingredients. They give you a detailed transition plan to help you to know exactly how to start feeding this to your dog, especially if you've not been feeding fresh food to your dog, or if you've been on a fixed food diet for a lot of years. There can be some concerns and considerations, and so following the directions, I think, that are well detailed out can be definitely beneficial. And they also do include a nice actually transition supplement, and this supplement can really help to develop better gut health for your dog, which can help to improve its over digestibility, which is an important factor when transitioning over to a new form of dog food. Okay, so now let's quickly talk about just a couple of handling essentially points, or essentially what's the experience like actually feeding this before we actually get into the taste test for the dogs. This is pretty straightforward. Because it arrives to you frozen, you are going to have to go through a thawing process. Like most things that you thaw out, you're generally going to want to have about 24 hours in terms of thawing it out and then having it be ready to be able to serve. The fact though their new packages essentially are individual in nature as opposed to kind of full trays, what you can do is essentially you could thaw a couple out, and because they're already lightly cooked, you could essentially store a couple of days ahead of time in the refrigerator. So if you want to have maybe 2 or 3 days serving of food, you could have that ready within the refrigerator, but you just essentially want to make sure, just like any type of food, it could spoil. So ideally you do want to make sure that you're allocating the right amount that you know you're going to feed your dog, and I probably wouldn't go more than probably 3 days in advance. So now let's quickly talk about the taste test. So for the taste test, we had Modoc as the dog that we set up his profile for. We had it pretty much rationed out to be able to give him about a month's worth of food, and ultimately had no issues. Modoc was super interested in it, really appetized by it. He pretty much ate it every single time that we gave it to him. He had no issues from there. Always seemed like he wanted even more of it. But then again, Modoc is not really, I'd say, a picky dog. I will say that we did try it out with our other dogs as well, and Bowie, who has very, very high food drive as well, she doesn't generally turn anything down. She also ate some, and I think we actually also tried it out with Ultron, and Ultron actually ate it a bit too. He didn't have any problems eating it, and Ultron is definitely a little bit on the more picky side of the fence. We didn't notice any adverse reactions in terms of any issues with the dog during the actual time that we were feeding the Ollie to him, and also the consistency of his stool when he got to the bathroom was really, really good. And this is something that we were hoping to see the same type of experience he has when he's on his raw food diet, which means that it's small, it's pretty much odorless, and it's consistent. And so if that's just something that you've kind of been having issues with your dog, definitely going over usually a fresher diet really improves the quality of your dog's bathroom experience. But all the way around, no issues with the taste test experience. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about the overall value and the cost. And this is probably the most complicated part of this review, but I'll try to hopefully make it somewhat general for you to be able to kind of get a sense of understanding. So first and foremost, when we talk about what we paid for MODOK, let's just go ahead and break down those numbers, and then we'll kind of give you a bigger kind of picture. MODOK, he's generally weighs about 55 to about 58 pounds. He's pretty much consistently within that weight class, and he does great there. So that's what we had him dialed in for. The quote that we essentially got for the amount of food that we would get for the amount of money they'd be paying was $63 a week. Now this is kind of tricky because Ollie doesn't give you food on a weekly basis. You can get at a minimum of either 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 8 weeks. So in actuality, what you're really paying, and what we were paying was $126 every 2 weeks, and in a month that means over $250. Now we spread this out to a much longer period because we essentially feed MODOK less than what Ollie says we should be feeding him, and this is really a decision that you make along with your veterinarian in terms of what you feel most comfortable in terms of the amount of food that you're feeding to your dog. In this regard though, it can definitely be significantly more expensive than kibble, but definitely the value and the quality of the food is higher than definitely I'd say even mid-range or even premium kibbles. You're getting a better class of food, so the value is better, but definitely you are paying quite a bit more money. Now in terms of kind of the total arc, of course if you had a larger dog, you're going to be spending even more money, and also depending on the activity level for the dog, you could also be spending much more money. What does this range really looks like? Well, for let's say really small breed dogs, maybe 10 pounds or around that weight, you'd be looking around maybe $75-$80. Definitely, I think probably less than about $100 a month. And then for definitely large breed dogs, so 90, 100 plus pound dogs, you could be talking about over $300 that you would be billed monthly. And that's if you select the 2-week interval period. Of course, if you go with the default period that Ollie now has, that you have to change, which is 8 weeks, you would be charged a significantly higher amount and also have to manage much more food. So these are all factors that you have to evaluate, and you're going to want to really go through the profile, see what your dog is actually going to have in terms of the cost, and if you definitely have factors that you want to evaluate, follow up with Ollie and find that right interval for you. You also can customize the amount of food that you get, going sometimes with just a lower amount. You can get either 25% or a 50% amount, which could also reduce that, and you could use this more kind of as like a topper or as a supplemental. So wrapping things up, we've talked about pretty much I think all the different aspects of Ollie, and hopefully you now have much better kind of understanding about the Ollie fresh human grade dog food subscription service. Now a couple of things just kind of recap on, I definitely think that it is a good quality dog food option. If you're looking for kind of an improvement to your dog's dog food, I think that this is a solid choice. I think, if you're looking to be able to resolve potential issues, whether they might be, allergy related, maybe it's overweight issues, whether it's energy levels, I think all of these things can actually be significantly improved by going to a fresher based diet like what Ollie offers. Are there areas that I'd like to see Ollie improve upon? Yes. One, I think that they could actually do better in terms of communication. It took them a really long time in terms of follow-up to have our questions be answered for our transparency aspect of our review. There also seems to sometimes be some inconsistency in terms of follow-up on customer service, what I can see reported online. So maybe just kind of spending a little bit more time to make sure that you're proactive at following up with customers. I think canceling the service or managing the service could be done much simpler if they just give you the option to manage it directly within the web-based app, as opposed to having to email them directly or call them to actually cancel the service if you didn't want to maintain the subscription service. I also think that the cost of the service is already so high that I'd love to actually see even a better class of ingredients, actually going and purposely saying that you have, let's say, organic based chicken or actually grass fed based beef. or things along those lines. It, I think, would only be a fairly moderate increase to the cost, but it would provide even a much higher class of nutrition to the dog food itself. But overall, definitely, if you're looking to transition to a better class of food, improve the palatability, and to have just a better, I think, experience for your dog when it comes to the food that you're giving with them, it is a solid choice, especially compared to a wide range of the kibble-based offerings out there. So if you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, I'd love to see them in the actual comment section below, so make sure to go ahead and drop them down. You can also find out ways to reach out to us on our social media channels or email in the description. We'll go ahead and list all that information for you, as well as links to the Ollie website itself. And while you're down there, don't forget to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button so you can keep it tuned here for all the videos that we'll have on the Experiences with My Dog YouTube channel. So with that, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to spay and neuter your dogs.